Cool. Yeah. What's been going on, man?
Not much. Waiting on the city for permits, finally.
Okay. What'd they say about all the hood stuff and Steam stuff?
Well, I told the engineer that I wasn't gonna put a hood because that was stupid,
Yeah.
and he figured out a way, I guess, just to not put it.
Okay.
I don't know. And
Okay.
so, yeah, I don't know if the city is gonna come back and say, "Oh, you actually need the hood" or something.
Yeah, that'd be weird. I mean, did you ever use the argument that like you can show that nobody else has one?
The what?
That you can show that nobody else has one in Texas?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I've seen some small breweries in El Paso, and they do actually have a hood, but they have one of those like the Psycho systems that a gas, just a big pot, like a one
hmm
barrel, like
hmm
almost a homebrew kind of pot. So it that
Oh,
thing
it's
is
like over
actually
a
open.
burner? Like
Yeah.
over and over. Okay. Yeah, there definitely is the issue of needing exhaust for,
Gas.
natural gas
Yeah.
exhaust, if
Yeah.
it's not contained like that, okay. If that's what they're thinking, that makes sense. But the steam,
If it's
uh,
electric,
yeah, if it's electric, would it let
what
out
you
all
gonna
the
do?
electricity?
How's the that pilot brew house?
Dude, I hauled ass and got it like 95% of the way installed, and then it's been like 3 weeks of trying after the startup of like trying to fix one fucking thing, and without that thing being fixed, it's still just sitting there. So I actually had to call in the big dogs and get some specialists in, because I installed the Steam system. We already have our Steam system, and I just
Yeah.
teed off of it to hook into this system, and I thought like pretty straightforward, nothing to it. And after installing it, we couldn't get up to temperature, or we couldn't boil. Like we could get to 206, 207, but could never get any higher, could never get a really good boil.
Yeah.
And I tried every sort of troubleshooting to try to figure out why that was, and eventually called out, some professionals, and they recommended changing out the solenoid valves that were like they're the steam solenoid valves
Mhm.
that the system came with, and they kind of determined that the flow rate is pretty insufficient for low pressure steam.
Oh,
So, $1,000 later, hopefully that's on Monday I can get that going again. But it's just frustrating. Like as you'll see, it's like you can get so close to the end and then just get tripped up on just about anything.
yeah. So it's not, so what's gonna be the solution for that?
Well, we could buy expensive real steam valves. We already have them on the rest of our tanks, but they're just like over $1,000 each, which is fine. Like if we have to, we have to. But the thing is, for the kettle, it's either on or off. So I'm just gonna bypass the whole damn thing and put a manual valve on it. Don't even really need a valve on the tank right there. I could just either turn it on or off from the main line. But then it just has no restriction. It's full bore. The steam, we have plenty of steam capacity. So just taking out the solenoid valves and putting in just manual valves.
So the problem wasn't really the capacity of the steam capacity, it's just something um with the valves.
Yeah, and that was kind of the annoying thing was we designed the steam system to cover like basically two of our breweries.
Oh shit.
So it didn't make sense to not for it this little 3 barrel, 4 barrel to not work. So, but we had to go through all those things and just kind of eliminate, what could it possibly be, and got to the very end, and the only thing left are those valves. So, there's still a slight chance that that won't fix it, that there's something else going on, but I'm
Mm,
pretty confident once we get those in, there's no other reason I can think of.
that's good. You're almost there.
Yeah.
Do you have to tell the city that you're installing that and go through the construction process again, like for inspections and all of that?
I won't say no. I will say I didn't, but mostly for the city and actually for the county and state, the state I think runs the steam boiler regulations, and when they come in and inspect it, they're really just looking at the unit itself, the actual steam boiler itself, and they're not going around looking at what we have it attached to. So I kind of
Oh,
feel like
really?
you don't need that. I mean, I would have if it seemed obvious that we needed to, but I think this is just a simple case of like the steam supply is already there. We're just hooking up more things to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a little bit of sense. Are you
Yeah.
worried that someone's gonna be like, hey, this is not right or something?
No, like you're in that stage where, yeah, anybody at any time could come in and like stop your progress when you're trying to open it, because that's when they're all looking at your
Yeah,
stuff. Once you get past that, the only time they care is if like there's a complaint, there's an issue, or some things have regular maintenance or regular like inspections, and if you don't do that, then they're gonna come out and be
yeah.
pissed. But yeah, like we've done a lot of stuff ourselves, and probably half of it we probably weren't supposed to do, but it's low risk kind of stuff.
Do you get that Steam system inspected like is it every year or
I think it's two
every 2 years?
years, and we just got it inspected, and it's fine. We take care of it ourselves, and that's the thing with these big brewery systems that like it's so critical. Two pieces of equipment are just absolutely critical: the boiler or whatever heating,
Mm,
and the cooling, like glycol chiller. And if there's ever a problem, it just halts everything. So,
mm,
I've trained all my brewers to understand their pieces of equipment, be able to do all the maintenance on it, even some repairs if it comes up to it. But, we have to keep those things in house because it's such a critical thing.
Do you have a backup for like if like the glycol system fucks up or something?
No, that's one of the reasons why it's so critical. There are options, like you could just get a second unit, and people have that. Like sometimes if they upgrade to a new unit, they might keep their older unit kind of as a backup.
Yeah.
Or on a single unit, you could have kind of like multiple fail safes, like multiple compressors, multiple circuits and things that allow you, if one goes down, you can just pull the other one up quickly. But at my size, we were just right on the cusp of like that being worth it or not.
Mm.
So we kind of went the direction of it's a new unit. As long as we maintain it and can, have somebody on speed dial for major repairs, um, then it's fine.
Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it sucks when it does. Yeah, it's like everything stops, and we've never had a catastrophe where beer had to be dumped, because there is the real chance that like if you're in active fermentation and glycol goes down, uh, and the fermentation just goes ape shit, and gets really hot and gets really bad flavors, then you probably dump that beer. But we've never
Yeah.
been in that kind of brief window of it really being an issue, which is lucky, but
Yeah.
it's almost a matter of
In what,
time.
in 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years. And I guess, well, now I'm thinking back at Black Star. The way I installed that one was kind of interesting because we had again a nice new unit, and as the glycol lines came down to the brew house, they went by our cold room. So
Mm.
actually just tied in our cold room refrigeration to the glycol. So it
Yeah.
wasn't using refrigerant like normal refrigerant. It was using kind of like, a
Yeah.
coil for with the glycol. And
Mm.
the problem with that was not only did we not have redundant systems, we had two systems relying on it, whether it was the brew house or the beer that we're trying to serve, so that we would have issues if it went down in the middle of the summer. All of our beer would be like 50 degrees and we're trying to serve it and it's all foamy and
Yeah.
a disaster. So that was maybe a little dumber because not only did we not have the backup, but like too much relying on one thing.
Was that just because of the designing system that it wasn't thought through, or?
Yeah, fair enough to say. Yeah. I mean, that was my idea of like, this seems cool. Like, why don't we just use this for our cold room? And, you know, out of the whatever 10 or 15 years that it ran, never really had too many like problems or, like percentage wise, we're talking about a fraction of a percentage that it actually was an issue. Um, so you could put some monetary values on that kind of stuff.
So
But yeah, how does this
I
work? What
guess
do we
we're waiting for people to show up. Hopefully some other people show up. Um,
So that was another guy who came and left.
yeah. Hmm. Usually some people show up like after 15 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll
Okay.
see. It's a shame that what's happening at Black Star, right? They went down.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, it had a good run. 15 years is a pretty good run, especially for such a unusual business model. Yeah, so a lot of good things to say about it. I think unfortunately just kind of like towards the end, mismanaged and tough, tough market and just
Mm.
it was kind of just a matter of time, I think.
They had good beers, but it wasn't. There was never people there.
Hmm.
The times that
That's the
lately,
problem.
yeah. So
Hmm.
that's a shame. Also, I know you went to the um with Steve. What's the school? That program with the American Brewers Guild.
American Brewers Guild? Yeah.
Yeah, I know they're getting kicked out of their place, right?
I don't know. Tell me. What do you know?
Yeah. I also completed that program like 2 years
Okay.
ago.
Nice.
So I'm still in their list of, news and stuff. And it
Hmm.
was maybe like a couple of weeks ago that the building got sold, and so the new owner was like, get out,
Okay.
like
Okay.
just kicking
Is
them out.
this what is it? Middlebury Brewing? What's the or Otter
It's
Creek or
the drop-in,
drop
the
in?
brewery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you go there?
Yes, but I don't think it was. So when I went through it, the main guy, Steve, British Steve, right? Is that who you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Hmm.
Um, I think he was at a brewery called Otter Creek in Middlebury, Vermont, and that's kind of
Oh,
where we
so it
did
was
our.
before he opened that other place.
I don't know if that place existed or not, but I don't remember ever that being part of the program.
Yeah, so I guess the school was in a brewery,
Hmm.
and so it was called Drop-In, Drop-In Brewing.
Okay.
And then they had, the school. So the last week, I would it would be like on site, so you would get hands-on on the
Yeah.
brewery and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they're selling their equipment, they're selling, I mean, everything. They were
Yeah.
just kicked out.
Interesting. I wonder if that means the school's over or he just needs to find a new home for it or something, a new partner.
Yeah. I know that he's selling all the equipment and everything, so The school might go on, but maybe the brewery might not.
Did you do an apprenticeship somewhere?
No,
Okay.
no. I went to I started working as a cellar person in a small brewery in El Paso,
Okay.
and they didn't have a brewer for some reason. It was already going down, the brewery. So I started brewing, but they had so many problems, like just little problems, like something that doesn't make sense. Like they were keeping their gas to serve the beer like at 2 or 3 psi. They were like, well, it's just, you know, the beer is already carbonated, so it's just to push it out. I'm like,
Okay. So they're just gonna.
the Henry's law, so like eventually that beer is just gonna be flat. And always wondering like that beer is kind of flat, and
Yeah, that explains it.
and I would tell them, and also like they had their mill really close to where they stored they had the room where the mill was, but then they stored their kegs like around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see dust coming in and out of that room. I told them that's a big, big, big issue.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
never listen. And eventually it just closed down. There was no people there and the beer
Yeah.
wasn't good.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I
Well, we
started
have
with
one person
this.
here. We have Brent. Is that
Hey, Brent.
people usually chime in or anything?
Hey there. I think we have issues with our link in Discord to the meeting, so I'm not sure.
Oh,
So
was
we
there
can
a
get some other
problem with the
people.
link?
Yeah. I think a lot of people use
Oh,
Discord, and I think it tends to like chop off these long links for like Teams meetings and stuff. Yeah.
oh, maybe that's why there's no people here.
Brent, where are you from, buddy?
Hey there. I live in outside of DC, Northern Virginia.
Okay, right on. You home brewer or professional brewer?
Yep, home brewer. Been actually home brewer for many years. Kind of involved with a couple clubs in the area that home brewing's definitely been a bit of a challenge to keep going.
How so?
Just I mean, as far as the homebrew clubs and stuff, getting people, we're trying to recover from the COVID days, and get new members. We need to be a little bit more active, but the online brew club's been, good resource.
Yeah, so we have
Yeah.
a pretty active Discord channel, and it's active all day at all hours because there's
Really?
members, in Germany, Australia, and the US. So you get, messages at 3 in the morning or stuff like that, and we have sub channels of if you visit a city, where should you go, and if you go to other towns, you can meet with other members, and we have this project called Average Brew Project, which is we take surveys of let's say a certain beer style, and then we vote on which ingredients to use, and then we release the guideline, and then everyone brews it, and some people get picked to send their beer to Philosophy, so they make an episode tasting the beers from the book.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and
How do you
then
pick the
some people randomly.
Okay, fun.
Yeah, and some people, submit the beers to competitions and stuff like that. And
Okay. Yeah, I think I just saw that something about a Czech lager. Was that the last
Yeah,
one that you
yeah,
guys
that
just
was the
did?
last one. Yeah.
Okay. So right now you're just like at the style of it. People haven't brewed it yet, or if people brewed it and sent it in.
Yeah, they brewed it and they picked the winners to send the beers to the guys at Brewlosophy.
Okay.
And so that's gonna happen. And we're gonna start a survey for the next style to pick.
Okay.
We have a lot of surveys.
hmm Okay. Yeah,
Anyways,
I can see how like Brent was saying, I've definitely seen over the years kind of like well, basically the homebrew club folks that I remember joining up with 25 years ago are still the main people, and not a ton of like fresh new blood coming in, and um as is life, I guess. But I do like the idea of like if that's the case, if it's getting harder maybe on a local level to get that participation, then just expand your reach and have more the national level and cool little groups like this that can kind of do these things, because there's still tons of people that love this kind of shit and want to continue to do it. But if it becomes kind of hard in your own area, then you get discouraged.
yeah, and there's constant communication with on Discord and stuff like that. And if people have problems with their beers, you can just ask
hmm hmm
whatever, and it gets resolved pretty fast.
hmm Yeah.
I guess I have a bunch of questions about um, Blue Owl's beer. So I heard a Master Brewer podcast episode. Someone from Bell's conducted a little experiment and found that the Lactobacillus buchaneri, KCI, and Plantarum, that those three in specific were they would give more of what they were looking for, scored better in a tasting panel than the other
Mhm.
kind of bacteria. Have you done anything like that to kind of pinpoint which bacteria works best with different styles?
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of the crux of especially doing wort souring, where you're focusing so heavily on bacteria and not age and funk, but sourness. But with every acid comes all sorts of other flavors dependent on whatever bacterial strain that you have. So I knew that going into Blue Owl, and out of the gates, I think even before we were open, I started a research project with University of Indiana University,
Mhm.
one of the two, that looked at this was a little more focused towards if you're sour mashing. So if you're using grain as your inoculant, grain could have anything on it. And that's a huge variable if you're a professional brewer
Yeah.
and you say, I'm just going to use grain as my inoculant, then
Consistency.
you need to understand what is on it, what is likely to be on it, how um, robust, is it a strong culture, a not strong culture. So I actually took something like, I don't know, 12 different samples from around the world of grain, and did an actual like DNA sequencing of the microbiome on the grain, and uh, what grows. Because it's one thing to be on the grain, it's another thing to be like, given the conditions that I'm souring at, what are the things that grow on there. And um, did sequencing to kind of see over time what grows on it. So
Mm.
the results, you can find the results out there somewhere. It's pretty interesting. But I would like to do like 5 more studies on it, because one of the things I found with one of my studies was I could take the same grain, and if I soured at 115 degrees, I will get distinctly different bacteria than if I sour at 117 degrees or
Hmm.
119 degrees or 121 degrees every time. Can you hear those beeping? I don't know how to turn that off. I'll just try to close
I'm
it.
not hearing any
Okay.
beeping
Okay.
unless.
It's my
You hear beeping?
okay. Yeah, I heard beeping. It's my computer. I turned it off. Um, so, not only is it like very varied what you're going to find if you're using natural inoculant, and that's why I think what's important in this is I'm not using a pure strain that you can get at a homebrew shop of like this is the bacteria, dump it in there, this is what I get. I'm using a mixed culture. Hey Brent, using a mixed culture and um, trying to trying to not go out of business by having too much variation in the souring or the flavor. And so then another study of that, which started getting a lot more attention over the last 5 to 8 years, is the individual strains and what flavor contributions do they have. Um, you almost have to balance flavor and performance because something like a Del Brecchi maybe is one of the more well-known ones, but not only is the flavor kind of weird to me, it's
Isn't that the
also a
one
very weak sour.
that's kind of cheesy?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, a little more on the milky cheesy side, that and Brevis, yogurty, and that's where it's
Yeah.
like, well, if you want your beer to taste like yogurt, then use this strain because that's where it comes from. And, in general, that's not what we're looking for at Blue Owl. We're actually looking for cleaner, but not simple. So it has to have
Mm.
some sort of complexity, but not a complexity of like uh, milk or yogurt. So
Yeah.
plantarum is actually one of the better ones that we found is mostly dominant in the temperature ranges that we use, even with just random grain. We can pick grain from anywhere and almost isolate out the plantarum. It's one of the most ubiquitous ones. So, but there's other ones too. So, if they did a study and they found three that they really liked, cool. You can do a combination of those things. You can pick a singular one, but there's also a lot of other strains too. That Amylivorous, I think, was one that New Belgium really liked because it had some complexity, but also very robust souring. Um, so yeah, it really depends on what you're looking for. But long gone are the days of like it meaning just one thing to sour a beer. There's just like with yeast, there's all different kinds.
How do you keep your beers consistent? If you're Are you still using the grain to sour, or by now you've kind of played it? Which bacteria do you like most?
It's a we used so I designed a system of quote unquote sour mashing. For my Black Star days, I tried sour mashing and using the professional equipment that I had was kind of insufficient. So when I started working on Blue Owl, I designed very specific equipment that was used to strip the bacteria from the grain in a kind of clean and effective way. And we used that for a couple years. It's called the MU, the Modular Inoculation Unit, just because I wanted to give it a cool name. But it effectively was just like a small sour mashing contraption that allowed us to have a lot of control uh, over the extraction of the bacteria. Um,
Can you
but
describe
over
that
time,
equipment? Like,
what's up?
how does it look like?
It looks like a. Do you know those? This was a thing. I think at Sierra Nevada, a torpedo. Have
Mm.
you ever heard of the torpedoes? They're using them for hops, but it was kind of based off of that design. But effectively, It's a long, like it's as tall as me, cone at the bottom, cylinder in the middle, and
Mm-hmm.
cone at the top, and then screens all in the middle. So we would load up each screen with some milled grain, and then from the bottom, after we knocked out and pasteurized the wort initially, we would then run that sweet wort up and over
Oh,
that
I see.
grain and then recollect that, kind of filter it, purge out all the air, get the temperature right, and just do this circle or cycle of wort over grain, which allowed us to not pull in too many off flavors. That was always one of the big issues with sour mashing is like you have grain in contact with water for a long time and you'd get all sorts of weird things and also you'd get air pockets or like dead zones of temperature where it was either too hot or too cold and you'd get variation and flavor and funkiness. So this was an attempt to kind of like get a clean, controllable, homogeneous extraction of the microbiome, the total microbiome off the grain, keeping the grain husks behind. And then once it got back into the sour tun, which is like our modified kettle, then it was up to us to, keep it anaerobic, to pre-acidify it, to watch the acid production and keep it at the right temperature. So, this whole system was made for modern day sour mashing, like on a
Yeah.
professional scale. And it worked really well, but it was kind of a pain in the ass because each time we were done with that one sour mash, we had to clean out this whole mew. And my brewers eventually kind of got over that shit, and they're just like, can we just like harvest from the previous batch and use a barrel or a half barrel into
Mm,
the next batch?
yeah.
So we basically started doing that, saw great results. Some issues we've had to kind of deal with over the years, but ever since then, we've basically just been using the same culture for like the last 8 years.
Oh,
So it's
I,
kind of interesting. Like we knew a lot about it initially, and now we don't know shit about it. We've just kind of let it go because it has worked. And of course, like from batch to batch, we get variations. There's a bit of a seasonality to it. If you can imagine, there's our culture sitting in a nutrient-rich solution, and it's sitting in our brewery and temperatures fluctuating and it maybe sometimes it only sits for a day and then other times it sits for a week. It evolves over time also. So
yeah.
when we go to repitch it the next time, we might see something weird like, maybe it sours half as much in the same amount of time. So what do we do in that case? Or other times it sours twice as much in the same amount of time. So how do we deal with that? So we've had to kind of learn how to adapt and keep it, within some sort of level of consistency, which isn't easy with a wild culture.
So you don't know what's in that culture? Do you ever like send
I
it
mean,
out
right
to?
now, no. We have tested it in the past, just when we've had some issues and all the same culprits that you would imagine, the plantarums, fermentums, um, there's a little bit of Delbreckia and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's been the usual five kind of species, and we just essentially try to select for those every time we cycle through. So keep the temperature right, keep it anaerobic, and don't let it go too long,
Is
essentially,
there a
before you
point
brew.
that where you would use grain again, or you just keep using that same culture that you have?
We up until a little while ago, we at least I made my brewers okay. They didn't love cleaning out the mew every time, but I was like, okay, but we have a beer called Smash Smash, and but Smash beer, single malt and single hop, but this was a sour mash smash, single malt and single hop, and the idea was we would take a particular grain, I think one of the original ones was like a New Zealand grain, so it had a southern hemisphere culture to it, like microbiome culture. And we used that as a single grain. Well, we would use that also for the souring too, which I thought was really cool. I don't think anybody else in the world thought it was cool, but I thought it was super cool. It was like that is we soured with this grain, whatever was living on it is what soured it, and then we brewed with it. And and then if yeah, I did some studies back then with like whenever we would do that just to kind of see what the bacteria was, why it was different. And we never really reused that stuff because we were going for at that point like full tilt production and we just needed things to kind of work right.
How do you have any problems with the when you can or the beer like down the line with the people having problems with the exploding cans or stuff like that?
Zero, zero over 10 years. This is, I think, definitely one of the misconceptions we had to deal with initially was yes, we are using a wild culture for souring our beers, but our beers at the end are quote unquote clean beers because it goes through that boiling
Well,
step. Yeah, and we have found that, it's not 100%. It's, the pasteurization or sterilization of it is not 100% effective. But that's the case for every process and every step, unless you're pasteurizing it at the very end, and then that itself still has um, some small percentage of something that could live through it. So we make clean beer. It happens to be sour and it happens to be wild. But, especially early on, people weren't necessarily doing the same methods we were doing. So there was just kind of like some confusion or other brewers who I just remember some story. I can't remember who the brewery it was. Some brewery like wouldn't let one of my employees in to go get a beer. He brought like a 6-pack to give them, and they wouldn't let him bring in that 6-pack to give them because they're like, that's going to contaminate
it's
our
a
whole brewery. It's
yeah.
like, those motherfuckers don't know what they're talking about, but be cool.
So you pasteurize your the cans before they go out?
Mm-mm. No.
No.
So, it gets that boil and it's effectively a clean slate going into fermentation. And then, of course, during fermentation, and beyond, there's always the chance of some mild contamination or some issue there. We've
That's
never really
everywhere.
had, yeah, yeah, anybody would deal with that. So we're no exception, but we we're a professional brewery and we keep shit clean. So we've never had an issue. The the one time we had to do a recall was my brewer accidentally put the wrong enzyme in a beer. I don't know if you guys have ever used it's one of them. So he meant to add like a VDK, like a diacetyl reducer, which is almost commonplace now, and accidentally added that enzyme that breaks down everything to make like a brute beer. It's like
Sure.
a amyloglucan kind of thing.
Yeah.
And basically, fermentation we thought had stopped, but that enzyme continued breaking down sugars even once it was in the can.
Yeah.
And by the time we started realizing and getting reports that like cans were exploding, we're just like, oh shit, what
Oh,
what
shit.
happened? And that's when my brewer was like, I think I may have put the wrong enzyme in there. If you're busy and it's a brew day and you're just kind of throwing shit in, then and you grab the wrong bottle because they all look the same. So we had an issue with exploding cans one time, but never like contamination. Actually, I think we're almost better off with contamination issues because of our low pH.
Yeah.
It has made our beers very robust. They last a long time. Like they'll oxygen may become more of an issue than any sort of like contamination because everything's it's fairly inhospitable at the pHs we're brewing souring.
Right. Do you have to use new yeast every time? Because I mean, you don't reuse it, right?
Yeah, that was the biggest issue. Well, one of two of the huge issues that we had to overcome before we were to open Blue Owl. One was like just getting equipment that could effectively sour and have control. And then the other one was how do you not reuse yeast? That's so baked into like production scale, cost of goods sold, that if you're trying to use new yeast every time, it just
That's a
doesn't
big
make
cost.
sense. So this was, almost 15 years ago now. I was for Black Star. I went to Denmark to do a collaboration with some old brewmaster Danish dude out there, and I was telling my problems of like I don't know how to make these affordable if we have to repitch yeast every time, and he's like just use dry yeast. And at the time, that was like before dry yeast was
good.
like there was a really bad name, yeah, for dry yeast. Everything was white
Yeah.
labs, tubes, and it's got to be alive. And anything dry yeast, you didn't know what the fuck you were doing. But apparently in the EU, people are using dry yeast all the time. And he's like, yeah, just do that. It's more affordable. So it's not negligible, but it's a quarter of the price of like liquid yeast. So we're able to do that. And now that we're brewing non-sours, we're able to pull from the non-sours for the sour beers. And then once it goes through sour beers, just got to dump it because it's not going to be good for reuse.
Yeah. I mean, there's really good dry yeast nowadays.
Yeah.
It's not like before, or from what I heard, at least. Even White Labs is coming out with some really good dry yeast, and
I know, I love it. If you were to go back, Brent, do you have the yeast book? Did you ever get the Chris White yeast book?
Yes, I do have that book.
Okay.
Good
It's
stuff.
a
I
great
use a lot of
book.
dry yeast these days as well.
Okay. Good. Yeah. He talked a little bit of shit about dry yeast in that book, and it's still the Bible. It's still the thing that I probably use the most. But it's just funny to see him kind of come back around and be like, okay, well maybe we'll make dry yeast too.
I guess it's about like getting advice on ground beef from Chick-fil-A or something, right? Like trust
Exactly.
a liquid yeast company is going to promote liquid yeast.
Yeah, a little biased.
So are you using a fairly wide mix of I think that's one of the other benefit, right, of dried yeast. You don't necessarily have to have two yeast that you use consistently. You can get bricks of whatever you want, right? But how many different dry yeast are you using?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think at a certain time, I'm trying to think now, it has fluctuated over the years, but I think there was a time where we maybe had like 7 different kinds of dry yeast, but not only did we, use multiple strains, but almost every batch had a blend of different dry yeast because we're using them in the bricks. We might say it's like 3 bricks of an English strain and 2 bricks of an American strain. And that's what worked really well for us. So it allowed us to not only just, stick within the certain style of that yeast, but then blend our own. So I think it was really useful for that because we didn't have any options. I don't know if this has come up much, but when you ferment a wort at a pH that's not, 4.9 to 5.3, whatever normal wort is, if you change that pH, you are fundamentally changing that beer, those flavors. And at Blue Owl, our whole intention was to make beer styles that you're familiar with that have acidity in them. So if I'm trying to make, I don't know, just a porter, sour porter, and I use a normal porter yeast, and that yeast, which is so like recorded and so much data about that yeast at a certain pH range, and nobody knows anything about what it does at other pH ranges. So all bets are off. Like everything is just different at these lower pHs. So we found we had to like really get creative with what worked and what didn't work and how can we change it. Like a good example of that is our Scottish ale. Um, you know, you imagine there is a yeast called Scottish ale yeast, and that's probably what you should use. We tried using that, and it was like caramel apples or something. It was just not right. No maltiness. Couldn't. It was just so estery, so fruity. So we actually ended up starting to blend in German ale yeast, which was a little cleaner. I think it was kind of a Kolsch kind of vibe. And eventually, I think at the end, it was pure German Kolsch yeast for our sour um, Scottish ale, and that is like somehow it actually tastes like a Scottish ale that was sour as opposed to caramel apple.
Hmm. Does the malt you use even matter when because of the sourness? Do you still get that differences in flavor if you use like a German Pilsner versus a non-German?
Yeah, that's a great fucking question. I mean, quality is still quality. If we use shitty malts, we get shitty beer. If we use great malts, we may get great beer if we do everything else right, which, you know, isn't guaranteed. But one thing I did find, all other things equal, if I was to, you know, sour a really nice Weirmann wort at 5.2 or whatever it is normal versus souring it at 3.5, the one thing that always stayed true is the malt character was diminished. So if
Hmm.
I wanted to make just a malty beer and I did everything else you would normally do to that style of beer and fermented it with that yeast, it would be lackluster. And you know, for various reasons, you know, I have to get into, but basically the maltiness factor was diminished. And what we quickly realized and had to kind of adapt for was, well, make it twice as malty going into it and
Right.
then sour it at that. And then when it comes out the other end, it's single malty. So, you know, between the malt and then hops, oils are also less soluble at low pHs. Um, the extraction rate, anything that if we made just the same two beers, one at a high pH, one at a low pH, the lower pH one would be not as malty or not as hoppy, especially in the aroma. And, you know, again, what we found is like, well, fuck, I guess we just have to add more hops. So we would add
Yeah.
like 25% more hops per style uh, to anything that we soured just to get that same amount.
So the beer is always kind of exaggerated with the ingredients just to make it a normal beer with sourness rather than trying to introduce that lactic acid with the same ingredients as if it were not sour.
Yeah, kind of across the board, and I don't like to make huge generalizations like that, but it has been true in malt, it has been true in hops, and actually has been true in fermentation flavor. When we tried to make a Belgian-y beer, you know, relies very heavily on esters, higher alcohols, phenols, all these things. Um, Again, two beers, different pHs. The low pH one has much more mild Belgian character. So that was one that kind of tripped us up because it's like, well, we can't just double the yeast. That's not really like how that works. It's not like just adding more yeast in there. So we actually don't make many Belgian strains. I mean, nobody, I guess, really does anymore. But you know, Belgian styles, because they tend to be kind of lackluster with this sourness, which goes against kind of what people would imagine with, you know, lambics and that kind of thing. But they're
Yeah.
obviously now two different things.
Have you tried blending um, a Just like if it doesn't work with the Belgian, just try blending a normal Belgian with the sour beer.
Yeah, we have,
It can work.
yeah, and it works, and it's fun, and like that was one thing we did with like barrel aged sours, because we still make we love barrel aged sours. We're just kind of not focusing on that, but we would sometimes take 10% of a really funky, crazy barrel aged sour and then blend it in with 90% of kind of more standard, sour beer, and got some of the best of both worlds there. You got a little bit of funk, a little bit of extra complexity, but you also got the freshness and flavor and drinkability of the non-aged one. So that became a cool thing. But those beers, again, mostly became commercially inviable, in the last 5 years.
Do brew salts affect the way bacteria behave? Like,
yeah, again, you're asking all the awesome questions that we had to fucking try to figure out, as this whole thing went on. And there certainly is a complex chemistry going on during these sourings, and the higher the buffering system, so Brent, like, do you add when you are mashing, do you take pHs of your mash?
Yeah, I do adjust, the mineral level based on my tap water, and I have a pH meter, and I've gone before sometimes, like, taking my meetings or readings, at least just mash. I have never got motivated so much to do, oil and fermentation type, readings, but I've kind of, got to the point where, the prediction in the software is usually good enough that I don't necessarily mess with, calibrating the meter and taking a reading. But I do usually adjust with, I find my water works pretty good for like an amber type beer.
Nice.
If I get in stouts and porters, I need to, raise the pH a little bit, and I do think that's helped those beers. And then I usually use some acid to bring down, any kind of lighter beers, and an IPA or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
that's great.
I'm not sure
DC?
how, I know there are people that would advocate strongly for, pH throughout the process. It's probably a little more important in what you're doing into the sour beers, but I don't know what your thoughts on your, because you brew some non-sour beers too, right?
Yeah, and since you mentioned it, we don't take a fucking pH after the boil. We don't take one, and I've always found that kind of weird. But I've never. It feels wrong. It feels like we should be testing the pH all the way through, but it doesn't matter at that point. There's nothing we can really do about it. We just kind of let it ride. But yeah, at the mash time, like you're saying, if in general we're kind of within the general range, it's not a big deal. But for souring purposes, salts, still affect flavor just like they would anything else. But buffering capacity becomes a huge issue. So if you took two solutions, one had virtually no buffering capacities, practically just water, and the other one had a ton of buffering capacity, and you soured both of them, you add your inoculant to both of them, they might get to close to the same pH. Like maybe one's 3.72 and one's or 3.68 or something like that. But one could also taste 3 times as sour as the other. And this was something I kind of had to wrap my head around a long way back, was pH does not mean sourness. It does not. You can take a little bit of water and add just a little drop of like phosphoric acid and drop the pH and drink it and be like, yeah, it's pretty much just water. Or you could take a highly buffered solution like wort and add a ton of acid to it. And when you drink that, you definitely taste that sourness. So a more reasonable metric for sourness is titratable acidity, which is like just basically, what percentage of acid in that 12 ounces, is it this much acid or this much acid? And if you have twice as much acid, it's almost pretty much going to be like twice as sour tasting, a little bit of wiggle room there. So we definitely have found that if we increase the buffering capacity of our wort, we would almost inevitably get a more sour beer unless we knew that going into it and said like, okay, well, let's just not sour it for as long. Because it can continue to create acidity without inhibiting itself with a low pH.
Do you measure lactic acid specifically?
Yeah, so that's the titratable acidity. And we actually created a unit for this, and I love that I was able to do this. I don't think, again, nobody else really gave a fuck, but it's very similar to bitterness units. Bitterness units is, you can measure it different ways, but it's effectively the concentration of certain compounds that we perceive as bitter. The more there are in there, the more bitter it tastes. Sourness can be done the same way. Let's just take lactate. Lactic acid and lactate, which is kind of like the associated flavor. The more lactic acid you have in there, the more sour it's going to taste. So we can then create a similar unit called sourness units that are a direct measurement of lactic acid in solution. So the higher percentage of lactic acid, if it was 5% lactic acid, that would be really high. But if it was, let me think of what it is. I think we usually are like in the 0.5 to maybe 1%. 1% lactic acid is pretty fucking sour, and we call that 100 SUs. 100 is not the top. It can continue on for till like 10,000 or something. But is it perfect? No. Is bitterness units perfect? No. But they do give you a little bit of an idea of what you're getting into, and that's helpful for us brewing it.
Have you tried to sour with any kind of other methods? Like, have you tried like tepache? You know what tepache is?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that the natural microbiome from like
from the pineapple
Yeah.
skin? Yeah.
Yes. We've used pineapples. We've used different kinds of fruits, grapes themselves. It's a common thing to let the grapes ferment themselves. The grapes, also in addition to yeast, have bacteria. So it's such a common thing to use whatever medium you're brewing or making wine with to also assist in like acidifying too. It's just a different microbiome. If you take a grape from the field, it's going to have a slightly different microbiome than if you took, some barley from that field. And the same could be true if you took that grape from 10 miles down the road. It'll be slightly different. So all those things kind of make different things. I always thought the tepache is like a little vomity.
Really?
I don't know. I don't know if I've just always had really bad stuff or if that's just like what it tastes like. So maybe some that has tasted good.
It's not supposed to taste like that.
Okay. I've just had bad stuff.
Yeah. So I guess we're coming close to the hour, and I really want to ask you, there's all this talk about the future of craft beer and, breweries closing down and people not drinking that much and younger people not being interested in craft beer or brewing. So how do you see the future of craft beer? Is there a future?
I don't know. I don't have a hot take on this. Like, I mean, obviously, I've been in it for 20 years now, and it's getting harder and harder every day. You see the trends changing. You put those red lines in the sand. Well, I would never make a seltzer, and then 2020 comes around. It's like, all right, well, now we're a seltzer brewery, or THC is a new thing in Texas, for probably all throughout the U.S. for like the Farm Bill and functional beverages and things like that. And it kills me because I personally, like, all my stars aligned at craft beer. My joy for making shit, my joy for like science and engineering all kind of came together. And if the world is at a place where that isn't really like enough to make a living, then that sucks. But that's what it is, and I'll just have to figure that out. Um, Maybe it'll come back around, some pendulum shit going on. But I think if nothing else, I don't. Long gone are the days where you like judge a brewery for doing something dumb or outside the box just to make a buck, because it's just like these breweries, they never, even in the best of times, nobody got rich. Even the best
Right.
ones, maybe are doing well, but there's no billionaire brewers out there. So, at the worst of times, they're just people trying to do something they love, but also like make a living out of it, and that can be really frustrating, especially as you get older, if you have kids, and you're just kind of like, just kind of over it. Then it's a shame. So I think if nothing else, the people that made craft beer special, which I think are people probably like the three of us here, that supported it, that are part of it. They need to continue to do that. And brewers need to continue to try to figure out how to get other folks too. And sometimes that sucks trying to like decide you need to hire somebody just for TikTok marketing, but it almost comes down to that.
Really?
So
You have a person for TikTok?
yeah, yeah. At
So
least a
what are
person.
your, you've got a pretty wide range of beers there, I see on your side. Which ones are selling and paying the bills, and do you find that people like, because if you're, I'm sure there's beers you want to make and you want to be popular, and then there's probably, it's probably like the people at like Woodmere, they probably, I'm not sure, if they wanted their Hefeweizen to be the only thing that people knew them
Yeah.
for. Well, I guess which ones are selling, and are they the ones you want people to be buying and know you for?
Uh, yeah, the ones that are selling are not necessarily the ones that I find the most interesting. When we started in 2014 with Blue Owl, uh, we were 100% sour until 2021 or so. We were 100% sour, and I never thought we needed to brew a non-sour because we were selling enough, and I fucking loved it. And I was like exploring what it meant, and basically could do whatever I wanted just because people were buying it. I mean, doing cool shit, but like people were buying it, so it enabled us to do awesome stuff. As soon as it became an issue and people like sales started dipping on sours, and we have a lease to pay and everything, it becomes really an exercise in who you are and what you want to do. Because now I would say our top sellers are three non-sours: our
Oh,
juicy
really?
IPA, our light lager, and our just kind of normal seasonal. And over the last 4 years, they went from 0% to like 60%, 70%.
Okay.
So it hurts a little bit that, like, the sours and all the stuff that I think is really cool aren't really paying the bills, but you can't get mad at anybody. You just gotta hope maybe you can find something interesting to continue brewing. So I don't know. I need my brewery to exist I'll continue to try to be relevant. I do think relevancy is important regardless of whether it's TikTok videos or whatever. Like if you're not relevant, then you're just doing it for yourself. Um, so we'll
What
continue
percentage
trying
of
to.
your sales then are at the tap room versus, distribution or being on tap at other retail establishments or?
It changed when we opened because I went from a brew pub mentality of like I want my product out in the world, and as a brew pub it's only on site. I was like I need to build a 30 barrel sour brewery, and that made a lot of sense initially because we were just maxed out for years. And now we're like doing partial batches, half batches of sours just because they don't sell enough to even make a full batch. So on site, I think like 10% of our volume comes out of the tap room ish, but about 50% of our gross profit comes out of the tap room. So if nothing else, we at least like try to use both of those distribution channels to kind of like make it a healthy business. But it's always a struggle. Like rent in Austin is nuts, and we're kind of close to downtown, so it's really hard. Um, so yeah, everything's a little bit of a challenge, but we try to try to keep our chin up and try to do cool shit and stuff that means something to us, but stuff that sells.
What are your plans to do with that pilot brewery? I mean, you're not gonna have to worry about volume that much, so that means you're gonna experiment a lot more.
Yeah, and you're not gonna like
What's
this,
the
and
plan?
I don't like saying it, but it's gonna be functional beverages.
Mocktails?
Yeah, like NA stuff, THC or teas and energy kind of things. And it's it pains me to even admit that, but that's kind of what it is. But it does, I will say, it does give us much more versatility to do more collaborations and fun little shit without risking a 30 barrel batch, or
Yeah.
committing to a 30 barrel batch. We have a 3 or 4 barrel pilot brewery. So we will do cool little beer shit in that, but like to be honest, it's mostly to like for product development um, for a beverage company. So not even a brewery, like a beverage company that makes all sorts of things. And the scientist in me is still kind of excited about that because it's everything's interesting problem to solve. But as far as like cool conversations, beer is still way cooler than those kinds of things. It's way more fun to talk about. So I wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and since a lot of people seem excited on Discord and everywhere else, I know people when they come to us and they talk about going to Blue Owl. So maybe it was something about changing the time or something that something happened. But um, anything else that you like to add? Where can we find you beer if you're out of state? Are you still I know you were distributing in pet cakes, right? Are you still doing that?
Not really. There were those little tech companies that popped up that were like Bev, where we would ship beer to all over the US, either direct to consumer or just some small retailers here or there. But no, just pretty much all in Texas. You're able to find us just about anywhere. You should be able to find either a Blue Owl or a Bob's. Um, but I think the best scenario is like come to our tap room because we still have that kind of experience first mentality where these beers they taste fine on their own, but they're going to taste like really nice if you're sitting in front of the bartender and you're having a conversation about either Howie Sour or where's the best barbecue in Austin and that kind of thing. I think that's kind of the specialness that I would hope people could experience.
Yeah, people are always nice at Blue Owl, and it's kind of cool to see that brew house through the tap room, and
Yeah.
it's in a nice area too. So,
Very cool.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have a lot of beers that are unusual. I mean, like a sour pale ale or the sour Mexican lager and stuff like that I just never see. I'd be really curious to try some of those.
Have you had any of them, Brent?
No, I've not.
Okay. Do you ever come down to
Virginia
Texas?
here, so I don't know that.
Okay.
I'll send you some.
I'm sure you know Mike Tonsmeire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I got an event up at his place tomorrow up in Sapwood Cellar, so.
Oh wow, Jesus.
Cool.
Crazy.
All right, Jeff.
All right.
Thank you for your time, and we got this recorded, so it's gonna be out there.
Send it out. All right. Well, thanks guys. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brent. All right, we'll see you.
See you.